Hello and welcome to a new episode of our program In the Hot Seat. Today we're very much delighted to have joining us here for this exclusive interview Mr. Denny H Kalyalya. He is the Governor of the Central Bank of Zambia. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. First of all, let's talk about the importance of this event. This is the African Export and Import Bank. What can you tell us about the aims and the goals of establishing such a bank, being its headquarters here in Cairo? We know this is not the first year it's been headquartered here in '94, but this is the first time that they have their own separate individual building. So talk to us a little bit more about this event.
Thank you very much first of all, for this opportunity. Yes, the Africa Exim Bank, as you heard, was established in 1993, but it became operational in 1994. Really, its establishment was responding to a need that Africa was facing, the issue of trade finance and the improving intra-African trade, because we haven't really had institutions that were supporting that initiative, which is so important for Africa's development. So this institution came in to fill that gap, and I think it has been playing that role very effectively. Zambia has been a member of AfrExim since 1994, and the part of it why we joined is indeed to participate in the growth of trade and the development of our country. So the cooperation that this institution fosters is very important for individual countries and for the African continent in general. So it has grown so much. Now we came here for two things. One is to inaugurate this building where we are talking from now. The bank had moved here, but it was not officially opened. So this is one important aspect of being here. Secondly, tomorrow will be inaugurating the president of the bank. We will be the third person since the institution was established. So that's an important milestone. Now, Zambia, apart from being a shareholder, when this current president was elected, he was elected in Zambia in June, and Zambia, by virtue of being the hosts, were the chairperson for the annual general meeting. So my coming here is really to play that role on behalf of the other shareholders to inaugurate the investiture of the new president. So I'm part of the process of overseeing that change of guard, as it were, from the previous president who has been here for 10 years. So we have the new president coming for an initial period of 5 years, and he may, depending on how things turn out, he may be elected for another 5 years. So the presidents, as you know, they are elected by the shareholders. Yes.
Now, is the Export and Import African Bank, are you trying to focus or encourage certain sector of the African society, perhaps the farmers maybe? In that terms, what are the aims of this bank?
I think it's generally the bank supports export-oriented corporate institutions. So it may be farmers who are involved in production for export. It could be in commodities, but it could be also in value addition. I think now the emphasis is on value addition, so that we avoid sending just raw materials, because that has been the trend. Now, in doing so, obviously, there is the aspect of employment generation, which has important implications for poverty reduction. So this institution partners with different companies, be it in agriculture, industry, tourism, as long as they are all export-oriented. And really, this is the gap which we are seeing is there in most of our countries. And in so doing, also encourage intra-African trade, because if we trade amongst ourselves, I think we do promote each other's economy in a more sustainable way. So this is what the bank is doing. It fills that gap. It could be in any sector, but there must be a viable project which has export orientation.
Encouraging more exports and imports between African countries, of course, also requires flexibility in regulations and in services. So in terms of the regulations and services that this bank is going to provide, also taking consideration that it's based here in Egypt, have you spoken with officials, or have you sort of discussed the applied strategies that will be taken in to ensure the easy process and access of the exports and imports of these services and goods?
Okay, this may not be a direct role of the bank, but clearly in its operations it works better. It's geared towards the private sector. So the general drive for private sector development is really the idea here. But several different governments, including here in Egypt, I think we all see the private sector as an engine of growth. If we are to see more private sector players taking part in this, it means that the environment under which they operate should be conducive. So in that respect, the bank plays the role of being a catalyst, because if there are no takers of its services because of constraints in the country, that is a pointer to the policy changes or reviews that the government, respective government, needs to do. So it's a whole related aspect. It's not a standalone. So through its work, sharing what it's doing, the support it offers to those companies that come through, demonstrate where actually government policy initiatives need to be taken. So it participates also in those discussions to share knowledge. Like we went to see the knowledge center upstairs, is it downstairs now? Part of it is to bring to the fore some of the challenges that the different African countries are facing, particularly.
Before we move into the role of the central bank in Zambia, regarding the exports and imports, which rely most probably on supply and demand, generally speaking, from your opinion, what do you think Egypt needs for its imports, and what do you think Zambia needs for imports and exports, generally speaking?
Well, I think most of our countries, we are looking for importing those items which will help develop the local capacity. I think imports of luxury items, they are accessible to a few individuals who have the money, but really to uplift the majority of the people, we needed more to go into, if we are to import raw materials which we use to transform our economies, because it's through that transformation that the majority of the people would be brought into the network. So imports really, I mean, you can not just be importing, you must also be exporting, because to import you need the foreign currency to be able to. But I think being selective in what you import is important in terms of supporting the local economy, because if you are just import dependent, it means that you are really depending for virtually everything from the outside. What if the environment, there are changes which we see changing many times, and that has implications on the stability of the local economy. So I think import must be looked at from the export side as well, very significant.
How do you evaluate the Egyptian-Zambian relations economically speaking?
Well, Zambia and Egypt, for one, we are both commercial. So there is a lot of commonality in terms of our aspirations for the big common market. But I think we are also looking at the bilateral level, which areas we could really promote each other straight. I know for a fact that there are some Egyptian companies I think which are in the energy sector and telecommunications. So those are important areas of cooperation. The Egyptian economy is quite big. We are a landlocked country, so there is a lot of areas where I think we could share education, tourism, for example. I think you are a big tourist country. We don't have much tourism, so we can learn quite a lot in that respect. Agriculture, I think Egypt, I think, had been doing well using the Nile, for example, irrigation. We don't have much irrigation going on in our country, yet we do have lots of water resources. So these are areas where technology, know-how, I think we could benefit from closer cooperation.
As the governor of the Central Bank of Zambia, do you think that the success or the scale of success of a country, economically speaking, does it depend on how organized and well prepared is the central bank of this country in terms of managing or dealing with crisis, internal and external economic crisis I'm speaking about?
It's very important, but I think it has to be appreciated that the central bank is one of the players. It's not the only player. I think ministries of finance, ministries of planning, economic development, depending on the country setup, are critical, because what typically in a central bank you are doing is you are managing demand, you are managing the broader things, which we say in our language macro issues. So micro issues really are not part of the repertoire for the central bank. We are interested in those, but that's not how our policies or operations operate. We interact mostly with the commercial banks, financial institutions which we regulate. In some cases that regulation is passed on, but when we do monetary policy, is the immediate interface is with commercial banks. So if you raise the interest rates, it means you are trying to tighten liquidity, which has implications on the bank's ability to provide liquidity to the economy. If you loosen, likewise, you are trying to say, okay, more resources must flow. But in terms of how the resources flow, there are other players in that space. Government policy is very critical. How government manages its finances, because in virtually any economy, I think the role of the government is extremely important. The government, through its expenditure, the government is the one which has powers to tax. The government can change tax policy to influence certain activities in it. So the central bank is a part and parcel of that. But we look more at inflation, which we call flat price stability. We look at most countries, the central bank also is the one which holds the reserves of the country. It also administers the exchange rate policy of a country. Now, that area depends on a whole range of things, because to build on your reserves, you have to earn foreign exchange. The question you are raising earlier on, the loans that the government contracts, you get foreign exchange from that, which builds on your reserves. So yes, the central bank plays an important role, but it's one of the players. On and by itself, it cannot resolve the country's problem.
The US dollar as a currency is a universal currency used worldwide for any financial dealings. The rise and fall of the U.S. value currency, the value of the U.S. dollar currency, does it affect or is it reflected on the economy directly? And what role does the central bank play here to ensure that there are not any distractions within the economy of a country due to the rise and fall of the U.S. currency? Because here in Egypt, for instance, recently it's been increasing. We do know that the central bank has been supporting or backing the U.S. dollar from its actual price in the market. Yet people are a bit frustrated that if it does increase any further, almost £9 now, that it could affect the economy to a very certain extent. How does that work in the Central Bank of Zambia, for instance?
We are no different, I think, from what you are experiencing here. Also, it depends on what really is your main source of foreign exchange. To begin with, I think the dollar, when it strengthens, because of what you said, it's a reserve currency of countries. Most major commodities, they are priced through the dollar. If you look at oil, for example, it's priced through the dollar. My own country's major export is copper. It's also priced in copper. So when the value of the dollar changes, obviously it reflects in the relative relationship between our domestic currency and that. Now, recently, I think the dollar has been strengthening in value, partly because investors see the US as a better bet for investment, notwithstanding that the interest rates in the US are still low, but there is a belief that with the economy in the US growing, the chances of getting good returns and in a secure way are better there. So there is this movement which has affected many of the countries' currencies, as we have observed. Emerging markets, developing countries such as ours, we have been affected. So yes, the dollar value change does affect us, but the ability of a country to maintain that stable relationship, you say that there are different exchange rate mechanisms. There is one where you peg your exchange rate to a basket or to a particular currency, but that presupposes that you have the dollars to back it up, because if you don't, then you are going to end up having shortages and more disruptive to them. So other countries, we allow the exchange rate to move in relation to the supply and demand relationship. So it depends on what the exchange rate policy countries face. But if you are going to be defending the exchange rate, it means that you must throw in dollars in there, and if your reserve level is low, even in countries which have high reserves, there's a risk. China tried to defend the yuan.
Yes.
They put in quite a lot of dollars, but it didn't stop. If the fundamentals are changing, you can't really stop. So most of us, what we try to do is to allow the exchange rate to move, but we try to manage the.
Finally, there have been a lot of economic reports speaking about a possible another Great Depression. What is the role of the Central Bank of Zambia in terms of facing such crisis? For instance, here in Egypt, when the economic crisis happened, the World Great Depression took place, internal markets in Egypt were not very much affected to that large extent, while other countries were destroyed economically. So what role does the central bank play here in Zambia?
Very important question, because I think the issue of globalization implies that we are all integrated. Indeed, a development in one corner has implications in the rest. But I think what we all try is to find ways in which we build some buffer against that internally. Now, how do you do that? It's a combination of things that as a country you need to do. One is really to encourage internal production and the areas of the economy which can support a large group of people to do those activities, so that you reduce your dependence, as it were, on the external side. But also, not every country is affected the same. So this is one of the roles of this institution also, is to encourage trade amongst ourselves. Because if we have a lot going between, say, Egypt and the other African countries, there is a chance that, not all of us will be affected in the same way. So we can buffer each other against such external development. So a lot of cooperation is needed. to be able to take policies that will not make the things worse
Yes.
in another country. So cooperation, meeting as we are doing here, we are also information on what is happening in each other's country and what should we be on the lookout for, what areas can we cooperate to avoid something happening.
Yes.
So these forum matches, they are costly, they are very important to inform one another what areas to focus on.
Mr. Denny Kalyalya, the Governor of the Central Bank of Zambia, thank you very much for joining us on the hot seat, and thank you for your insight and for fruitful information.